Hi, this is Don. I'm taking a break from my calendar studies to delve into the sonnets of William Shakespeare. Poems of Love, it says here on the cover. Um, to start off with, I'm going to make a distinction between William Shakespeare and William Shaksper. Shakespeare is credited with writing the sonnets. William Shakespeare was a commoner. He was not a noble in the Elizabethan age. My first examination is going to be of the first 17 sonnets, which involve the fair youth. I'm going to focus on the Stratfordians and the Oxfordians here. I'm going to kind of leave the Baconians out of this discussion for this portion of the sonnets, because the patron for the sonnets is supposed to be, if you look here at the dedication, they're dedicated to W.H., which are the initials of Henry. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. It starts with a W. The initials are reversed. He was the third Earl of Southampton, and Shakespeare calls him the male mistress of his passion. So what's going on in these first 17 sonnets? What I've got here is Shakespeare by Another Name by Mark Anderson. It's kind of a large tome, but actually it's about 400 pages after all the end matter, appendixes and such. The epilogue ends on page 380. So I've got that as a reference. That would be the Oxfordians' view. And then I also have a book called Who's Who in Shakespeare's England. I have a large collection of books on Shakespeare, so these are just a few selections. So you can look up dates in here. It's pretty easy to find. Everybody is listed with their name. So you can look up facts in here as far as dates. There's also a timeline at the beginning of Shakespeare by Another Name, so you can look at how all the dates match up. On one side you have historical events, and on the other side you've got Edward DeVere dates, so you can see how they match up. So the sonnets weren't published until 1608 or 09, but they were believed to have been written about 1593. Now, as I was saying, Shakespeare, who may perhaps have been living in London with the Earl of Southampton, the third Earl of Southampton, for information on that, I think it was a book called Like to the Lark by Frederick J. Pohl, Pohl, which is subtitled The Early Years of Shakespeare. So it's a possibility that Shaksper and Henry, the third Earl, that might have been his entry into London society, is staying with the Earl of Southampton. But that has to do with Shakespeare. That has nothing to do with the sonnets. Because as I was saying, Shakespeare is a commoner. He's not a nobleman. There weren't that many nobles in Elizabethan England. I think that was in the In Search of Shakespeare series by Michael Wood, where it talked about how many nobles existed in Elizabethan England. There weren't that many, maybe like 22 or less. So the problem here is that Edward DeVere has a daughter who was born in 1575, whereas Shakespeare's daughter, who was back in Stratford, was born in 1583. So there's like about an 8-year difference there. So in 1593, Shakespeare's eldest daughter would only be 10 years old. There's no way he's going to try to marry her off to a nobleman, as the sonnets are portending to do. So in my mind, 99.9%, I'm sure that these sonnets are written by Edward DeVere. So what's going on? Let's see what. Okay, we try to keep these video lengths to about 10 minutes, so we're doing okay right now. Basically, the situation is that the Earl of Oxford, the 17th Earl of Oxford, Edward DeVere, has a daughter named Elizabeth that he wants to, or it's not so much he wants to marry her off. Lord Burleigh, whose daughter is married to Oxford, wants to see his granddaughter married off to Southampton, but Southampton is kind of not interested. So the sonnets are addressed to the Earl of Southampton in an effort to get him to become interested in his daughter, supposedly. So, but the reason I'm making this video is to show that there's some comedy here. I'm getting this from Shakespeare by Another Name. You can look in there and get more information on this after you watch this video. But the humor is that it appears that the Earl of Southampton is more interested in DeVere's wife, Anne Cecil DeVere, than in his daughter. So that creates a problem right there. So, sort of like the comedy of errors. So that's where the humor starts coming in. What else was I going to say on this subject? Sonnet 1. From fairest creatures we desire increase, that thereby beauty's rose might never die. But as the riper should by time decease, his tender air might bear his memory. So the premise is that DeVere wants to, he doesn't have a male heir. He has 3 daughters, just like in King Lear. He also had an infant son who died, so with Anne he had 4 children altogether. But he has no heir, so he's kind of looking to Southampton to provide him an heir. You know, the Earl of Oxford is a noble, and he has no way of continuing his line without an heir. And so he's at being born in 1550. In 1593, he'd be 43 years old already. So time is, he's actually going to die at age 52 in 1604. So time is kind of running out for him. And so he's going along with Burleigh in the sense that he'd like to see, but he's also he's attracted to Southampton. That's where the comedy sort of, so all these other writers in the Elizabethan age were kind of making parodies at this time, you know, around 1593, because DeVere, as Shakespeare, had written 2 poems, Venus and Adonis and Lucrece, that had also been dedicated to the Earl of Southampton. And he was kind of losing my thought here. It's very complicated, but you know, why did Edward DeVere need a patron? You know, Shakespeare would probably need a patron. You know, if he was living with Southampton, it stands to reason that he would be Shakespeare's patron, but it doesn't totally logically follow that DeVere would need a patron. So the context here is that he's looking at a future son-in-law, and so that's where the comedy comes from. It's like because the Earl of Southampton is kind of has a pretty appearance or whatever. He's perhaps a bit feminine in appearance. So if there's some comedy there, that's what it's about. I think I'll end here.